Hey guys, how y'all doing today? My name is Franchise Fanatic and welcome back to the channel. And welcome to Star Wars Month. Yes, it is December and we are starting Star Wars Month on a big bang by tackling one of the first, well, it is the first Star Wars film. Yes, we're reviewing Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now, I just watched this and let me tell you that this is my first time watching Star Wars for a real review. So, actually for YouTube. So I'm like, well, as a Star Wars fan, it's a great film. I'm not biased, but, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to like The Phantom Menace. However, what I did is I made a little bit of a list, and what we're going to be doing is talking about different bullet points. I wanted to do this for all my Star Wars movies, specifically because I don't want to miss something, and I want to get my full review on these movies, because it is Star Wars Month, and I really want to give them their credit, while also talking about some of the iffy things. So, first, what I want to talk about is the prequel start, or by necessarily saying it's not the original trilogy. People who grew up with A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, or Episode 4, 5, 6, which were the first three released, it's very confusing. But, when people who grew up with them and they watched The Phantom Menace in 1999, of course they were like, well, it's good, but it's not the original, I like Luke and Leia, Han, and, Chewbacca, all these things, I love all those characters. And, it's fine. However, it's kind of weird to say that, because I feel personally that if you just go, oh, I don't like it because it's not what I grew up with, I think that is biased, I do think that is not the proper reason to watch any movie. I think you should go into every movie expecting to not go, oh, well, I like that one better, Just like if you review the Lego Batman movie to the Lego Ninjago movie. You can't go, oh, I think Batman's funnier. Well, it's like, well, they're different movies, that's the same. You have to review them as they are separate entities. So, just want to get that out of the way. There are some people who only think these prequels are terrible because they're not the original, and I just don't think that's very right. I think that's a little bit immature. But as me going forward, I didn't grow up necessarily with 4, 5, and 6. I grew up with 1, 2, 3. So this was probably my first Star Wars movie. I was only 1 year old when this movie came out, because I was born in 1998. I get, well, 2, I don't know, whatever. So, I, of course, didn't see it in 1999. I was, like, super duper young. I wasn't allowed to see anything. I didn't know what anything was. I was just born, essentially. But, these are the films I grew up with. And just because I grew up with the prequels doesn't mean they're the best ones. Let me just get that out of the way. Second thing I want to talk to you about is a boring story, and it's about politics. Now, I was watching this with my friend, and he kind of said it's a little boring. It's a little bit slower. And I said, well, okay, that's a fair critique. But that's not necessarily a negative, because you have to understand that The Phantom Menace is the first Star Wars movie. It's the first thing of Star Wars ever. So when you go in and you see Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi as a Padawan, it's not like, oh, there's something before that. This is the beginning of what Star Wars is. So, of course it's not going to be about action and all these things yet. Emperor Palpatine, or Sheev Palpatine, he's still rising to power. When you watch this movie, he's not, zapping people and, going all crazy yet. He's really just this guy who, has these evil intentions, and he's just trying to kind of facade his way to those intentions. Now, I think that, yes, this movie is slow, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I do think that, again, this is the first one, so you can't be going crazy yet. And then, of course, my biggest point is that if you were to watch Episode 1, 2, 3, they're great, for the most part. But if you watch Episode 1, 2, and then the Clone Wars movie and the Clone Wars TV show, and then 3, you will get a very broader aspect of what Star Wars is. How Anakin and Padme fall in love, the fall of Anakin Skywalker, and of course there are some episodes in the Clone Wars devoted to politics. Just having Padme stand up there talking, get money trade from one federation to another, or one trade route to another. And I think that that's really good, because it shows that, yeah, Star Wars isn't just about battles and fighting and the Force. It's also about a collective people coming together to settle differences and become one, united under a galaxy, and that's what's really cool. So yeah, a lot of scenes in this movie are them talking, discussing trade routes and signing treaties and all that, but I really do think that it helps, I don't know, there's something about it where it's not boring, because you know that there's so much more involved, and this is the beginning, so they have to start sort of small, The Emperor really is just like, okay, I want to get Padme to sign this treaty, or the Queen Amidala to sign this treaty, so essentially she can, make it legal for us to invade and destroy. it's very simple, and it's very monotonous and sort of boring, but that's the whole point. I think it's really supposed to be that way. So that when you watch the Clone Wars in Episode 2, you kind of see that this is how it started, very small and minimalistic, and then you go to more of the Emperor, and now with the First Order and all that. So regarding the pacing, I really did enjoy it. Yeah, there are a few instances where the Jedi just sit around and, go, oh, well, we could do that, or we could do that. And, that is what it is. But for the most part, I really did enjoy the story. Regarding the boringness of it, I didn't think it was. The Jedi suck. That's my next topic. Well, okay, let's be real. The Jedi are badass. However, while the Jedi are good people, their intentions sometimes lead to negative consequences. And, of course, spoilers if you haven't seen all of Star Wars, Alan. But, however, we'll get to that point. But also, what I want to talk to you about is, yeah, the Jedi are good, but they kind of... They go, oh, something's weird with that Anakin kid. No, we'll just let it go, it'll be fine. Or, oh, Order 66 happens. I wonder how. And all the Clone Wars, basically the whole prequel era with the Jedi and the whole Republic is essentially failure. It's just, okay, we tried to do something, that didn't work. We messed up. And even Luke says it in The Last Jedi. The best thing the Jedi did was create the fall of Anakin and the rise of Darth Sidious. That's all they did. And when you think about it, that's all it really did amount to. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad story. That's actually really well and good storytelling. Because it shows, like Yoda said again in The Last Jedi, failure is the best teacher. Now, of course, we're not talking about Last Jedi yet. We're talking about Phantom Menace. But at the same time, it kind of goes hand in hand and kind of tandem with that. The Jedi, yeah, they're awesome, and they're freedom fighters, and they're warriors and peacekeepers and all that. But everything they do kind of blows up in their face in the end. And that's just because they do stuff. The Jedi used to think, okay, well, let's sit in this room, the council. If something really bad happens, then we'll do it, and also Obi-Wan and the Jedi had a very ruley thing, you can't have love, you can't get this, you can't do that, you can't do this, and one of them was also, you can't really, I don't know, it's just strange. You can't love, it's like, well, really, why not, I don't know. Again, that's just because the Jedi were like that, that's what they thought. They were like, well, if you see a Sith, you either kill the Sith, or you become the Sith. That's how the Jedi used to think. And again, that's kind of what caused, again, if you watch Clone Wars with Ahsoka Tano, she kind of goes, well, the Jedi are great, but they have all these weird things, and they're almost warriors more than peacekeepers, as much as they like to say they are peacekeepers. And even Anakin Skywalker sees that with Ahsoka, and that's, of course, one of the main reasons why he turns to the dark side, because the Jedi, they're good, but they go about things in a kind of strange and orthodox way, and that's kind of why a lot of the Jedi kind of break up in the end, too, of course, with Order 66. So, yeah, the Jedi are great people, but again, this is providing the framework of what happens in the end, essentially. Okay, this is a big one. Jar Jar Binks. A lot of people hate Jar Jar Binks. They say, oh, he's just comic relief. He's a kid character. He's the worst character in Star Wars. He's number one, Rose Tico. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, I can understand if you don't like Jar Jar Binks. I can understand that. However, I love Jar Jar Binks. Is he the best character in Star Wars? No. Is he the worst character in Star Wars? No. I do think that wholeheartedly Admiral Akbar is the worst character in Star Wars. And before you go, dislike, you suck, go to hell, before you do any of that stuff, I do have to say that I will back this up when I talk about future films. But I do think Admiral Akbar is the worst Star Wars character. He's a good character, but he's definitely the worst one in terms of what happens with the story. So anyway, that's just my one too. But with Jar Jar Binks, yes, in The Phantom Menace, he's a clumsy goofball. He trips. He takes out, battle droids by shooting himself. That'd be funny. Shooting a guy and then, tripping over his wires, and the battle droid shoots other guys, and he really is comic relief in this movie. And that's fine. Because The Phantom Menace, yeah, it's rated PG, and, 10-year-olds until you're dead can see it, but at the same time, it's a very serious movie. There's not a whole lot of jokes. And I think that Jar Jar Binks, well, maybe George Lucas could have done something different. I do think it ultimately paid off. I think Jar Jar Binks was funny. I found myself laughing at Jar Jar Binks at the time. I thought he wasn't annoying to me. He was kind of like Mater. Everyone hates Mater from the Cars franchise. I think Mater's funny. I don't know. It's just me. In my opinion, I think Jar Jar Binks is really cool in this movie. And, again, on top of that, in Episode 2 and 3, for those of you who do hate him, he got less of a role. But also in the Clone Wars TV show, which is canon, and in tandem with the Skywalker saga, essentially, he does a lot of great. He becomes general. There are literal episodes when him and Mace Windu and him and Padme Amidala or him and whoever go on missions, and he's not just a moron or an idiot just climbing around and breaking stuff. He actually helps the plot, and he becomes more of a smart and educated, character for that part. So I really do think Jar Jar Binks in this movie, yeah, he's goofy, but to say he's the worst character in Star Wars, that is far from the truth, because he does redeem himself a lot in future installments of the Star Wars franchise. And again, I thought he was funny in this movie. You know, he did what he had to. I enjoyed it. The story. Now, this is, of course, The Phantom Menace, so it is the very beginning of Star Wars, and this is the prequel trilogy is essentially describing the fall of Anakin Skywalker and the rise of Darth Vader. So that is essentially what we're doing. But with the Clone Wars animated TV show and the Clone Wars animated movie, it really does bring everything to a full circle and more of a enriched environment. You know, so when you watch, if you just watch episode 1, 2, 3, you're not really getting the full story. You got to watch the animated stuff because it really does bring out the other characters in the council, like Luminara Unduli or Barra Sophie and Ahsoka Tano. And, it shows more of the struggles with Anakin and Palpatine and everything that happens, so it's really cool. But this movie does essentially, again, it's the first one. It shows Obi-Wan Kenobi as a Padawan, so it's Qui-Gon Jinn as a Jedi Master, and it shows young Anakin, Jake Lloyd playing young Anakin. And I think the story's great. You know, it is slow, like I said in my other point with the story about politics, but that's what it is. You know, that's what Star Wars started out as, something very similar, very small, you know. Obi-Wan even says, "You were right, sir. The negotiations were short." And they were. Because, 5 seconds later they're blasting their way through battle droids. But it started with just, okay, we got to get this person to sign a treaty. And now look where we are in Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, right? So it has to start from something, and I do think George Lucas did a great job starting this framework of what Episode 1 is. I really do think that. Now into a more of like a review sense than a talking about it, but the writing, or the script, or the screenwriting, whatever you want to call it. The main issues that I have with the prequel trilogy, Episode 1, 2, and 3, is the writing and the acting, but we're going to talk about the writing first for a few seconds here. It's very strange, because George Lucas wrote and directed Episode 1 through 6. Yeah, he had a little bit of help directing and writing in a few instances, but mainly it was him doing that stuff. And honestly, this sounds really strange, and I'm sorry if this rubs across the wrong way, but George Lucas is a great person. He gave us Star Wars. He was the birth of Star Wars, but in a sense, he also kind of killed Star Wars. Because, yeah, some great video games come out of the prequel trilogy, and I honestly love all the movies, alright? I am going to give shit to a few of the prequels. I have some small issues with all of them, I'm not like going to be like, oh, Star Wars is great, A+. I do have some real issues, but overall, I love them all. However, I do think George Lucas did a very terrible job with the writing, and of course, the acting and the directing with these movies. Because if you watch Episode 4, 5, 6, the writing is fine, for the most part. I really didn't, sure, maybe Leia Organa goes into a British accent a few times in A New Hope. Big deal, right? It was the 70s, who gives a crap? I really do think that the writing in 4, 5, 6 is better than 1, 2, and 3. And I'm not saying the writing in this movie is all bad, but there are some moments where Anakin's like, yippee! And I'm like, first of all, no kid would ever say yippee to that, ever. No one says yippee. If you do, you're Jake Lloyd. Second, there are a few ADR moments, particularly after Anakin Skywalker wins the pod race. He goes, "Mom, I did it!" And his mouth isn't moving. And I have my glasses now. This is my first time seeing this movie with HD glasses. So I'm like, oh my god, he didn't open his mouth. There are a few scenes where it's like that. And of course you do get this kind of sense of, well, the writing's not too good. And some of it is, don't get me wrong, like I said, some of it's fine. But there are a few instances where, Jake Lloyd's like, yippee! And, the acting kind of goes along with that. There's a guy in the Stormtrooper whose eyes go really big. And he's like, "We lost power!" And you can just tell he's looking at something like, what the hell am I doing? And then he's like, "That little droid did it!" And it's fine. But then before, he goes like, really, like, "Shields are down!" I'm like, what's with this acting? And this writing? It's really strange. Again, it's not terrible, but that's the main reason why I'm docking this movie, is for the writing and the acting. Some of it's good, and some of it's really, really bad. Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor. They're great. My real issues are Jake Lloyd. Now, here's my other thing. Jake Lloyd. This dude got fucked up, man. Big time. Because upon watching this movie for a review, I have to admit, Jake Lloyd did not do a terrible job as Anakin Skywalker. I thought he was horrible. But then as I rewatched this for a review, and I'm like, he's not too bad. Sure, there's a few lines that are written weird, and sure, there's a few lines he delivers weird. But it's really not that bad. Is it like, Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson good? No, not even close. but he does do a pretty good job. And there are a few moments where he's, high-fiving his buddies on Tatooine and he's saying things, and you're like, well, this is what a little 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid would say, There's a scene where he's like, he's saying bye to C-3PO before he leaves Tatooine. He's like, you've been a real great friend. And I'm like, that doesn't work. And then he's like, I promise I won't have you moms, he says something like, I promise I won't, have mom sell you for parts. And that was like, okay, you did good, so there's a few, I'd say for every, 5 times Jake Lloyd does a great job playing Anakin, he takes a step back 1 or 2. And again, that's not his fault. He's 10 years old. You can't expect an Oscar-worthy performance. However, is he amazing? No. Is he bad? No. I just think he's good as Anakin Skywalker. The writing really tore it down, though, for me. And then, of course, we all know what happened to Jake Lloyd. If you don't know, he went crazy, drunk driving, over-the-limit speeding. He's in a mental institute, kind of like Arkham Asylum. I'm assuming he's out now, but I don't know if he was just nuts from the beginning or if we kind of caused that, because I do know he got bullied a lot in school afterwards, after Episode 1, for his performance. Oh, you were terrible. That was really bad. What was with that writing? And, I mean, little kids can pick up when you're being honest about a thing or not. And, I mean, it's true, So, Jake Lloyd, not too bad, not too good either. Some of his lines are great, some of them are not. There are a few moments where I'm like, ugh, I don't know. And then there's some where I'm like, yeah, that's great, keep going, So, that's that. But really, again, going back to the writing and acting, it's a bit of a hit and miss for sure. But again, it is more of a negative than a positive, because you get these elements where, even Natalie Portman, who was I think only 18 or 17 when this movie came out, when she was filming it. So, she's better than Jake Lloyd, but there are a lot of moments where she's talking, and you're like, why would she ever say that? And she's like, there are certain moments when she's like, oh, she's just staring into the camera. And I'm like, this is really creepy. There was one moment where they're in Shmi Skywalker, who's Anakin's mom. Shmi and Qui-Gon Jinn are talking, and you can actually, if you, I didn't really see this, I saw it one time, but if you look in the background, you can actually see Natalie Portman mouthing the words to what Qui-Gon is saying. So, I get it, she's a fan, whatever, but at the same time, it's like, you are Padme Amidala, you can't be messing this up, And again, the writing for her character is pretty atrocious. And there are a few things where it's like, ooh. Even Shmi Skywalker, there are some moments where I'm looking at her, I'm like, that's a great mother figure, she's playing the mom in a great way, older mom figure, perfect. And then, when she's watching Anakin race, and she's just looking, I'm like, even her, and even she's like, Anakin, and I'm like, just the way she says things, and I'm not making fun of her accent, it's just the way that people say things in this movie where you're like, why would you say it like that? I wouldn't have that. That's really weird. That's awkward. So, again, writing and the acting is not terrible. A lot of writing in this movie is fine, and a lot of acting in this movie is fine. But I'd say for every great scene, there's one that tears it down. And that's really where I think the bulk of it is. Alright guys, so sorry about that real life call, and I had to do a quick edit in this. But going back, I want to talk about my next thing, the CGI. Now, for being 1999, this movie doesn't have terrible CGI. It actually really holds up. I mean, there are shots of the battle droids in Naboo, and it looks so good. I mean, it's literally like it could be, shot now, to this day. I mean, the CGI, some of it's bad, and some of it holds up. There's a lot of practical things, like Newt Gunray, the Nemoidians. His mouthing doesn't completely line up, but it is what it is. I'm not going to nitpick too hard. However, going further, there's one shot where they use, Jedi super speed, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi in the very beginning, and they go, like that. That looked terrible. We've never seen that, I don't think, ever in anything Star Wars from that point. So, I don't know. Again, CGI, I have to say, pretty much a positive. I really did enjoy it for the most part. The scene edits, this is what I have a problem with, too. There's a lot of scenes that are edited really strange. And I'm not talking about the circle or the fading out of the scene transitions. I'm more or less talking about how things are shot. Some of them are very off-center, off-proportion. George Lucas didn't... I don't really think he's a good director. I think he kind of assumes that the audience are idiots, and he has to have characters say things instead of... A good actor and a good filmmaker doesn't have to say anything. They can just act it, and we know, because we're not idiots. George Lucas sometimes frames things and does things where he thinks we're morons, and he's like, oh, I have to have you say that, because then they won't know what's going on. It's like, no, we get it. So some of the scene things are a little strange with editing. If you really want to nitpick the Tatooine pod racing scene, as much as I love that scene, and everyone says, oh, the best scene in Episode 1 is the pod racing scene. And I might not disagree with you on that, but I think that this whole movie is well worth it, not just that one scene. But, you know, going forward, I think that the next thing I want to talk about is the some scenes last too long. Now, this is kind of strange, right? I love action scenes. I love movies. But sometimes a scene can last too long, even if it's a really good scene. For example, the Kingsman Church scene. It's great. It's a little long, but it works. No, it's really fucked up. It works. You get something like, oh, I don't know, the pod racing scene. Coincidence, right? It's really fun. But the problem is, it takes up a huge chunk of the movie's timeline, and it doesn't get boring, but you just kind of want it to move on, because George Lucas shot it, you actually see all 3 laps. There's no, like, you know, okay, the first lap, and then they're on 3, you know, time lapse for, you know, common sense-wise for a movie. No, we actually see all 3 laps. And while I will admit that each lap has something different and unique and something fun going on, I really did start to go, okay, when is this scene going to be over? I love it, it's fun. But like I said, even a fantastically shot and great scene that lasts too long still lasts too long. So that is a bit of a negative, even though I love that scene. Of course, is this movie that bad? Is it bad as what people are saying? No. In my opinion, no. Again, the writing is pretty bad in a lot of cases, and the acting is pretty weird. Some of the ADR is a little strange. These scene transitions are very strange. And I really do feel like George Lucas should not have directed and wrote these movies because they're pretty poorly made in that regard. Of course, Episode 2 and 3 are way better. Am I going to say Episode 1 is the worst Star Wars movie? No, I don't think there really is a worst Star Wars movie. This one does kind of feel a little weak, if I could say that, as far as Episode 1. Like, to start Star Wars off, it is a bit of a weak note, but again, it has to start small to get big. You know, you can't start with huge stakes like The Rise of Skywalker is going to have, or The Last Jedi. You have to start from somewhere. And I do think that George Lucas did a good job with that, but his writing can be very odd sometimes and very cringy, and so can the acting. So, you know, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan, they're great. Padme and Anakin, they have good moments. But again, every time something good happens, it feels like they go back one step. So, overall, again, is this movie bad? No. As a huge Star Wars fan, I love it. As a film fan, it has some flaws, I will admit. But either way, I really did enjoy watching this movie. And I'm going to give Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, a B+. It's a good movie, for sure. It's not great. Well, as a Star Wars film, it's great. But as like an actual film, there are some, like I said, the writing and the acting is a little strange. And when you watch it, like if you watch, you know, The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi now, or Rogue One or Solo, which I think are the best Star Wars films ever, not just because they're the newest, because the most care and love went into them, I think. But the acting in those movies is amazing. And then you go watch this, and you're like, I don't get it. And a lot of people are like, oh, you know, it's an old movie. The acting is crap. It's just old. And then I'm like, well, that shouldn't matter. You know what I mean? Acting should be great no matter what. It doesn't matter what time period you're in or what year it was made. Yeah, I get it. You know, 66 Batman has shite acting. But I think that's supposed to evoke a very campy feeling. Episode 1 is a very serious Star Wars movie, you know. Of course, Jar Jar Binks lightens it up, which is a good thing in my opinion. But when you go to that length, and the acting's that bad, it's bad. It's not all bad, though. Like I'm saying, it's very hard to say. I can't be like, oh, it's great, or oh, it's bad, you know. There are some good elements in this movie, but again, like I was saying, for every 4 steps we go forward, we go back 1 or 2. And for that, again, I'm going to have to give that a B+. There's just a few negatives. As a Star Wars fan, again, I love it. But as a film fan, I like it. So hope you guys, you know, if you agree with me, whatever. If you don't, whatever. It's your opinion. I respect your opinion. So with that saying, I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I really enjoyed watching it, though. I really had a lot of fun, and I can't wait to rewatch it. It's one of those movies that, you know, it's just so much fun to watch. I love Star Wars. So anyway, guys, this is my first video of Star Wars Month. I'm going to be reviewing all the movies and playing some games and talking. Here's my thing for you. In this video, I want you to please, please, please comment below what you want me to talk about Star Wars. What do you want me to talk about? Anything Star Wars. Video games, comics, movie, anything that is canon, please ask me, and I will try to make a video on it. Because once I review the movies, I want to do a whole month of Star Wars, so I need your input. What do you want me to talk about? Anyway, guys, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this review. Again, I really do enjoy Phantom Menace. It has some problematic issues, but it is what it is. And, yeah, I enjoyed it, so thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you.